The ship was a relic, drifting silently through the void like a forgotten shadow. Ancient, weathered markings stretched across its massive hull, their alien script indecipherable even to the most advanced translation software. It wasn't just any ship, it was a dreadnought of a bygone era, an artifact of the legendary Kranthak Dominion. Rumors had always painted the Kranthak as warriors who knew no equal, their entire existence dedicated to the art of war. Most species in the galaxy regarded them as myths, frightening, yes, but ultimately extinct. That was until the Sol Defense Fleet stumbled upon the wreck. It was Lieutenant Ava Callan's first assignment aboard the exploratory vessel Argent Flame, and she had imagined herself cataloging mineral deposits or perhaps negotiating trade treaties with the Kartha cluster. Instead, her team was tasked with boarding the Kranthak dreadnought. The tension on the Argent Flame was palpable, a mix of fear and curiosity that kept the crew on edge. They didn't know what they would find inside, but everyone agreed on one thing: they were walking into history. As Ava and her team boarded the ship, a wave of unease washed over them. The air inside was still and heavy, like a tomb. Their helmets filtered out the faint tang of ozone, but it couldn't block the oppressive weight of the ship's long-abandoned corridors. Dust coated every surface, and the walls were lined with intricate carvings, tales of battles fought long before humans had discovered fire. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Corporal Dren, gripping his plasma rifle tighter. "Focus," Ava replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Our job is to assess and secure. Let's not jump at shadows." The team moved deeper into the ship, their boots clanking softly against the metal floor. They found signs of battle, blaster scars etched into walls, scattered fragments of what looked like weapons, but no bodies. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though every scan showed the ship was devoid of life. When they reached the central chamber, the team froze. At the room's center, suspended in an energy field, was a figure unlike anything they'd seen. It stood over 9 feet tall, clad in an armor that seemed more alive than mechanical, its surface pulsating faintly. The being's eyes were closed, its head bowed as if in meditation. "What the hell is that?" whispered Dren. Ava stepped forward, scanning the entity. "It's in stasis," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The life signs are faint but present. This might be one of them. A Kranthak warrior." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. If it was true, they had stumbled upon a living remnant of one of the galaxy's most feared civilizations. "Command, this is Callan," Ava said, activating her comms. "We found something, someone. I think you'll want to see this." As the team awaited further instructions, the chamber hummed to life. The carvings along the walls began to glow, and the air grew charged. The stasis field flickered, then shattered with a burst of energy. The warrior's eyes snapped open, twin orbs of glowing amber that seemed to pierce straight through them. The Kranthak moved with fluid grace, its gaze sweeping over the team. It tilted its head, as if assessing them, before speaking in a guttural, resonant language. The universal translator struggled for a moment before rendering the words. "Who dares disturb Kranthak soil?" Ava stepped forward, her heart hammering. "We mean no harm. We're explorers, humans from Sol. We found your ship and thought it was abandoned." The warrior regarded her for a long moment, its expression unreadable. "Human," it said, the word laced with disdain. "Your kind are untested. Why are you here?" "We're just trying to learn," Ava said. "To understand your people." The Kranthak let out a low, rumbling laugh. "Understand? My people were gods of war, our strength unmatched. And now, we are but whispers. What could your fragile kind hope to comprehend?" Before Ava could respond, a klaxon blared in her comms. "Lieutenant Callan, we've got incoming," barked the voice of Captain Lorne. "Multiple unidentified vessels heading our way. They're armed." Ava's stomach dropped. "Understood. We'll regroup on the Argent Flame." The Kranthak's eyes narrowed. "You are hunted?" "Yes," Ava said, her voice tight. "We need to leave." "Then you will need me," the warrior said, stepping forward. For I am Caltharak, last of the Kranthak. And if battle comes, you will not survive without my blade. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Bringing an ancient alien warrior aboard their ship was a risk, but they had no time to debate. As the unidentified vessels closed in, Ava made the call. All right, Caltharak. Let's see if you're as good as the legends say. They raced back to the Argent Flame, the ship's engines roaring to life just as the first enemy shots streaked across the void. Ava barely had time to process the chaos as Caltharak took command of the tactical station, his massive hands moving with surprising dexterity. These vermin dare to challenge us, he growled, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Fools. Under Caltharak's guidance, the Argent Flame fought like a ship twice its size. The crew watched in awe as the warrior barked orders, his strategies unconventional but devastatingly effective. The enemy ships fell back, retreating into the darkness. When the battle was over, the crew erupted in cheers, but Caltharak remained stoic. This was nothing, he said. Your enemies are cowards. The real fight is yet to come. Ava approached him cautiously. Thank you. We wouldn't have made it without you. Caltharak turned to her, his glowing eyes unreadable. Do not thank me, human. If you wish to live, you must learn. Your kind is soft, unprepared for the galaxy's true horrors. But perhaps, you can be shaped. The words sent a chill down Ava's spine. She couldn't tell if they were a warning or a promise. Either way, she knew one thing for certain, their journey had only just begun. The aftermath of the battle left the Argent Flame's crew buzzing with equal parts exhilaration and unease. Caltharak, the ancient Kranthak warrior, had proven himself a formidable ally, but his presence was a constant reminder of the unpredictable forces they had unleashed by boarding the dreadnought. Ava Callan found herself at the center of it all, the de facto bridge between her crew and their imposing new guest. In the ship's central conference room, Captain Lorne leaned over the table, a holographic display showing the retreat paths of the hostile ships. They'll be back, he said grimly. This wasn't a random attack. Someone knew we were here, and they wanted something from that ship. Caltharak, seated at the far end of the room, rested one massive hand on the hilt of a blade he'd retrieved from his ship. The weapon shimmered faintly, as though alive. They were scavengers, he said dismissively. Weaklings. But where there are scavengers, there is always a predator nearby. Ava crossed her arms. And you'd know this because I have seen it, Caltharak replied, his voice like the rumble of distant thunder. The galaxy is a battlefield. Always has been, always will be. You, humans, are blind to it. But you will learn. Captain Lorne shot Ava a pointed look, one that said, keep him in check. She nodded, suppressing a sigh. Managing Caltharak was proving to be her unofficial new role. The following hours were spent trying to piece together the puzzle. Sensor logs from the enemy ships revealed a troubling pattern. The vessels bore no official markings, but their weapon signatures were unnervingly advanced, far beyond what most scavenger groups typically had access to. Whoever they were, they had targeted the Kranthak ship for a reason. As the crew worked, Caltharak observed silently, his massive frame a constant, looming presence. At one point, Ava caught him staring at a display of human history scrolling across a terminal. He didn't look impressed. You're awfully quiet, she said, walking up to him. Something on your mind? He didn't answer immediately, his glowing eyes fixed on the screen. Your species has survived despite its frailty, he said eventually. You are clever, yes, but fragile. It is, puzzling. Ava raised an eyebrow. Fragile? We just helped you survive an ambush. You followed orders, Caltharak corrected. It was I who ensured your survival. Ava bristled but bit her tongue. There was no point in arguing with him, not now. Well, if we're so fragile, why are you still here? The warrior turned to her, his expression unreadable. Because you interest me. And because you may yet prove useful. It wasn't long before their situation escalated. The Argent Flame had barely left the debris field when the sensors picked up another fleet on an intercept course. This time, there were no scavengers. The ships were sleek, black, and heavily armed, military-grade. They broadcast no identification, and their silence spoke volumes. The crew scrambled to prepare for the inevitable confrontation, but the tension on the bridge was thick. Ava could feel the weight of every eye on her as she worked to coordinate the defensive systems. Caltharak stood at the center of it all, his presence both a comfort and a source of anxiety. "These are not scavengers," Caltharak said, studying the tactical display. "They are hunters. They come for me." "Great," muttered Dren, manning the weapons station. "Just what we needed." "They outgun us," Captain Lorne said grimly. "If they're here for Caltharak, we could hand him over in." "No," Ava interrupted, surprising herself. "That's not who we are." Caltharak's gaze snapped to her, his amber eyes narrowing. "You would defy them? Risk your lives for mine?" Ava met his gaze. "We don't abandon people. Even if they're 9-foot-tall war machines with superiority complexes." For the first time, Caltharak's expression softened, if only slightly. "Perhaps you are not as weak as I thought." The enemy ships didn't wait. They opened fire as soon as they were in range, forcing the Argent Flame into a desperate series of evasive maneuvers. Ava worked frantically alongside the rest of the crew, but it quickly became clear they were outmatched. Shields flickered under the onslaught, and warning lights bathed the bridge in an ominous red glow. "Lieutenant, we're not going to last much longer," Dren shouted, his voice barely audible over the alarms. Caltharak stepped forward, his towering form commanding attention. "You fight as prey," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You must think as hunters." "And what does that mean?" Captain Lorne demanded. "It means you stop running," Caltharak said. "Turn and strike." "That's suicide," Dren protested. "Perhaps," Caltharak said, his tone almost amused. "But it is the only chance you have." Ava glanced at Captain Lorne, who looked torn. They didn't have time to argue. "Do it," she said, surprising everyone, including herself. "Turn us around." Lorne hesitated, then gave the order. The Argent Flame spun to face the pursuing fleet, its weapon systems roaring to life. Caltharak took over the targeting controls, his hands moving with practiced precision. The first volley caught the enemy ships off guard, striking weak points in their formation. Caltharak's strategies were unorthodox, but they worked. The Argent Flame danced through the chaos, delivering devastating blows even as it took damage. Despite their best efforts, it wasn't enough. The enemy adapted quickly, closing in with relentless determination. Just as it seemed the end was inevitable, Caltharak let out a low growl. "There is another way," he said. "What way?" Ava demanded. Caltharak's gaze was fierce. "We return to my ship. The systems there are still functional enough to deliver destruction these cowards cannot comprehend." Ava's heart sank. Going back meant flying straight into the enemy fleet. But they had no choice. "Lorne, plot a course." The return to the Kranthak dreadnought was a harrowing gauntlet. The Argent Flame took hit after hit, its shields barely holding. By the time they reached the derelict ship, it was clear they couldn't take much more. As soon as they docked, Caltharak moved with purpose, leading Ava and a small team into the heart of the ancient vessel. The corridors, once oppressive, now felt like a lifeline. "What exactly are we looking for?" Ava asked as they ran. "The core," Caltharak said. "A weapon of last resort." "That doesn't sound ominous at all," muttered Dren. When they reached the core chamber, Ava could only stare in awe. The massive, glowing construct pulsed with energy, its design incomprehensible. Caltharak began activating it, his movements deliberate and confident. "What is this thing?" Ava asked. "It is power," Caltharak said simply. "Enough to end this fight." Before Ava could press him for details, the ship shuddered. The enemy had boarded. "They're here!" Dren shouted, raising his weapon. Caltharak didn't flinch. defend the chamber. I will finish this. As Ava and the others took up defensive positions, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the halls. The fight was coming to them, and they had no choice but to meet it head-on. The footsteps echoed louder, each one a drumbeat of impending confrontation. Ava tightened her grip on her rifle, her heart pounding in her chest. The glow of the core bathed the chamber in an eerie, pulsating light, casting long shadows across the walls. Caltharak remained at the central console, his massive hands moving with deliberate precision as he activated the ancient weapon systems. "They're coming," Dren hissed, his eyes darting toward the corridor entrance. "What's taking him so long?" "Stay focused," Ava snapped, positioning herself behind a console for cover. "We hold this room until he's done. No matter what." Caltharak's voice rumbled through the tension. "The core is not a simple device. Its power requires precision to awaken. If you cannot hold your ground, leave. I will finish this alone." "We're not leaving," Ava shot back, her voice firm. "So do your part, and we'll do ours." The first enemy breached the chamber's threshold. Clad in sleek, black combat armor and wielding energy weapons far more advanced than Ava's rifle, they moved with a precision that spoke of ruthless training. Ava opened fire, her shots sparking against their shields. "Contact!" Dren shouted, unleashing a volley of plasma rounds. The enemy spread out, their return fire lighting up the room. Ava ducked behind her cover as a bolt sizzled past her head, the heat scorching the air. "Hold the line," she barked. "Don't let them through." The battle was chaos. The enemy moved with relentless efficiency, their weapons tearing through the defensive positions Ava and her team had hastily set up. But the humans fought back with equal ferocity, their desperation lending them a tenacity that caught the attackers off guard. Dren, crouched behind a console, lobbed a grenade into the corridor. The explosion rocked the room, sending two enemies sprawling. "Take that, you bastards," he yelled, his voice tinged with manic energy. Ava didn't have time to celebrate the small victory. More enemies poured into the chamber, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm them. She glanced toward Caltharak, who continued to work unbothered by the chaos around him. "How much longer, Caltharak?" she shouted. "Moments," he replied, his voice calm despite the turmoil. "If you fall before then, it is your failure, not mine." Ava gritted her teeth, firing at an enemy who was attempting to flank them. "You're welcome for the cover, by the way." The fight grew more desperate with each passing second. The enemy seemed endless, their weapons relentless. Ava's team was running low on ammunition, their defensive line crumbling under the onslaught. "They're pushing us back," Dren yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "We can't hold them much longer." Ava knew he was right. The enemy was too well equipped, too organized. They weren't scavengers or pirates, they were something far more dangerous. Whoever had sent them wanted the core, and Caltharak, at all costs. "We hold!" Ava shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "No retreat!" As if on cue, Caltharak's voice thundered across the chamber. "It is done." The core roared to life, its glow intensifying until the entire chamber was bathed in blinding light. The enemies hesitated, their movements faltering as they shielded their eyes. Caltharak stepped away from the console, his massive frame silhouetted against the core's brilliance. "Your time is over," he growled, addressing the attackers. "Now, you face the wrath of the Kranthak." The walls of the chamber shuddered as ancient weapons systems activated throughout the dreadnought. The ship itself seemed to awaken, its long-dormant systems roaring to life. Turrets emerged from hidden compartments, unleashing torrents of energy that tore through the enemy ranks. Ava stared in awe as the tide of battle shifted in an instant. The Kranthak dreadnought wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress, a weapon of unparalleled destruction. Caltharak moved through the chaos like a force of nature, his blades slicing through enemies with lethal precision. The ancient warrior was unstoppable, his movements a dance of calculated brutality. For a moment, it seemed as though they might actually win. But the enemy wasn't finished. As the last of their ground forces fell, Ava's comm crackled with an urgent message from the Argent Flame. "Lieutenant Callan, we've got a problem," Captain Lorne's voice came through, tense and hurried. "Their fleet isn't retreating, they're targeting the dreadnought with everything they've got." Ava's stomach sank. "How long do we have?" "Minutes," Lorne replied. "They're charging some kind of energy weapon. If they fire, this ship, and us with it, won't stand a chance." She turned to Caltharak, who had just dispatched the last of the attackers in the chamber. "Caltharak. The fleet outside is preparing to destroy the ship." The warrior nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "Then we will destroy them first." "How?" Ava demanded. "We're outnumbered, outgunned." "We are not," Caltharak interrupted, gesturing toward the core. "This ship holds the power to obliterate their fleet. But the cost will be great." "What cost?" Ava pressed. "The core's energy is vast but unstable. To unleash its full potential is to ensure the destruction of this vessel." He paused, meeting her gaze. "I will remain to see it done. You and your crew must escape." Ava's breath caught. "You can't." "I can," Caltharak said firmly. "And I will. My purpose is clear. I am Kranthak. I exist for this." For a moment, Ava considered arguing, but the look in his glowing eyes stopped her. He had made his decision, and she knew there was no changing his mind. "Fine," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But if we're doing this, we're doing it together." Caltharak's expression softened, just slightly. "You are braver than I thought, human. But no. You have a crew to protect. Go." With no time to waste, Ava and her team raced back to the Argent Flame, the dreadnought's systems roaring around them as Caltharak prepared for the final strike. The ancient ship seemed to sense its purpose, its very structure vibrating with contained power. As they boarded the Argent Flame, Ava couldn't help but look back at the dreadnought. Caltharak stood at the airlock, watching them leave. He raised his blade in a silent salute, his glowing eyes unwavering. "Callan, we need to move," Captain Lorne shouted from the bridge. Ava nodded, tearing her gaze away. "Get us out of here." The Argent Flame surged forward, its engines burning bright as it raced away from the dreadnought. Through the viewport, Ava watched as the enemy fleet closed in, their weapons primed to fire. Then, the dreadnought exploded. The core's energy unleashed a cataclysmic blast, a wave of destruction that consumed the enemy ships in an instant. The shockwave rocked the Argent Flame, but the crew held steady, their ship narrowly escaping the devastation. Ava stared at the screen, her heart heavy. Caltharak was gone, but he had saved them all. For a long moment, the bridge was silent. Then Captain Lorne spoke, his voice quiet but firm. He was a warrior to the end. Ava nodded, her eyes still fixed on the fading remnants of the explosion. "He was more than that," she said softly. "He was a reminder of what we can be." The Argent Flame flew on, carrying the survivors, and the legacy of the last Kranthak warrior. The silence aboard the Argent Flame was deafening. The crew, still shaken from the battle and the loss of Caltharak, worked quietly at their stations. The dreadnought's destruction lingered in everyone's minds, its aftershocks reverberating not just through their ship but through their sense of reality. They had witnessed something ancient, powerful, and utterly beyond their understanding, a glimpse into a bygone era of unrelenting war and the sacrifices that defined it. Lieutenant Ava Callan stood at the viewport on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the stars. The remnants of the Kranthak dreadnought had already dissipated, swallowed by the infinite void. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Caltharak was gone, and the galaxy had lost one of its last ties to a forgotten age. "Lieutenant," Captain Lorne said, breaking her thoughts. "We need to debrief." Ava turned, her expression weary but resolute. "Of course, sir." The debriefing took place in the ship's main conference room. The senior officers, still recovering from the adrenaline of the fight, gathered around the holographic display. Captain Lorne's face was drawn with fatigue, but his voice remained firm. The destruction of the Kranthak dreadnought was unexpected, he began. We're lucky to be alive, but the enemy fleet wasn't acting on impulse. They wanted something specific. Ava nodded. Caltharak suspected as much. He called them hunters, said they were after him and the core. What does that mean for us? Asked Dren, his voice tense. If they knew about the Kranthak, what else do they know? What else are they after? Lorne rubbed his temples. That's what we need to figure out. Our scans of the wreckage picked up faint signals, encrypted transmissions from the enemy fleet. We're working to decrypt them now. Ava frowned. If they were willing to throw that much firepower at us, they're not going to stop. We might have destroyed their fleet, but whoever sent them will come looking. And they'll find us, Lorne said grimly. Unless we're ready. Hours turned into days as the Argent Flame drifted through uncharted space. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage to the ship and analyze the data they had recovered. Ava spent most of her time between the bridge and engineering, coordinating efforts and keeping morale high. But in the quiet moments, when she was alone, her thoughts always returned to Caltharak. He had been an enigma, a relic of a long-dead empire, yet his presence had left an indelible mark on her. His teachings, his unwavering courage, and his ultimate sacrifice weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't help but wonder what he had seen in humanity, what had driven him to believe they were worth saving. One night, as she sat in the dim light of her quarters, a soft chime alerted her to an incoming message. It was from the ship's science officer, Dr. Alara Vynn. Lieutenant, Alara said, her voice excited, I think you should come to the lab. We've finished decrypting the transmissions. The lab was buzzing with activity when Ava arrived. Alara stood at the main console, her hands flying over the controls as lines of alien code translated into readable text. A holographic map of the galaxy hovered above the table, marked with dozens of points of interest. This is what we found, Alara said, gesturing to the display. The enemy fleet wasn't just after the Kranthak dreadnought. They've been tracking ancient sites, places tied to long-extinct civilizations. Ava studied the map, her brow furrowing. They're looking for something specific. Exactly, Alara said. And I think I know what. Look at this. She brought up a fragment of a decoded transmission. The words were stark and ominous. Activate the Harbinger. Secure the weapon. The Harbinger, Ava repeated, the name sending a chill down her spine. What is it? We're not entirely sure, Alara admitted. But if it's tied to the Kranthak, it's safe to assume it's incredibly dangerous. Ava's stomach sank. If they're hunting these sites, they're not going to stop until they find it. Alara nodded. And if they do, we might not be able to stop them. The ship's trajectory changed that day. With the decrypted transmissions as their guide, the crew of the Argent Flame set a course for the nearest marked site, determined to uncover the truth before their enemies could. The journey was fraught with tension, every scan of the surrounding space was scrutinized for signs of pursuit, every shadow a potential threat. When they arrived, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and unnerving. The planet was barren, its surface scarred by ancient battles. At its center stood a massive structure, half buried in the dust, a fortress built in the unmistakable style of the Kranthak. This is it, Ava said as the ship descended. The first piece of the puzzle. The crew worked quickly, establishing a perimeter around the fortress and beginning their exploration. Inside, the air was heavy with the weight of history. The walls were etched with the same carvings they had seen on the dreadnought, each one telling a story of triumph and loss. At the heart of the fortress, they found what they were looking for. A massive chamber housed a device unlike anything they had ever seen. It pulsed faintly, its energy subdued but unmistakably alive. This must be the Harbinger, Alara said, her voice tinged with both awe and fear. What does it do? Ava asked, her fingers brushing the surface of the device. Before Alara could answer, the fortress shook. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a distant roar echoed through the corridors. They found us, Dren said, his voice grim. The enemy descended upon them with relentless fury. Ava and her team fought to hold the fortress, but it quickly became clear they were outnumbered. As the battle raged, the Harbinger began to awaken, its energy growing stronger with each passing moment. Calthorak's words echoed in Ava's mind, "You must think as hunters." "Activated," Ava said suddenly. Illyra's eyes widened. "Are you serious? We don't even know what it does." "We don't have a choice," Ava said. "If they take it, it's over. We can't let that happen." Illyra hesitated, then nodded. Together, they worked to unlock the Harbinger's full power. The device roared to life, its energy surging through the fortress like a tidal wave. The enemy forces faltered, their ships falling from the sky as the Harbinger's power overwhelmed them. When the dust settled, the battlefield was silent. The enemy was gone, their forces obliterated by the Harbinger's might. But Ava knew the victory was temporary. The transmissions had spoken of more sights, more weapons. The fight was far from over. Back aboard the Argent Flame, Ava stood at the viewport once again. The stars stretched endlessly before her, a reminder of both the vastness of the galaxy and the challenges that lay ahead. "We've bought ourselves time," Captain Lorne said, stepping up beside her. "But not much. They'll come back." "I know," Ava said, her voice steady. "But so will we. We'll find the other sites, uncover the truth, and stop them. Whatever it takes." She turned to face him, determination etched into her features. "Calthorak showed us what we're capable of. He believed in us. Now it's our turn to prove he was right." As the Argent Flame set its course for the next site, Ava felt a spark of hope. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but humanity had faced impossible odds before. And now, with Calthorak's legacy guiding them, they would face them again.